Check. 1, 2, 3.
We should have
First, I want to say good evening to everybody. Thank you for coming out. I'm just going to give you a little background of who I am. My name is Lenny McCullough. I served in the military for 25 years. I've served in law enforcement 8 years thereafter. Been an instructor in firearms, been an instructor in active shooting, been an instructor in also alertness and awareness for the last 15 years. I've taught this class in several venues as far as Las Vegas, as far as working in Las Vegas, also out here in Florida as well. What we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit about active shooter situational awareness. This is primarily important for churches nowadays because of the environment and what's been going on. Here's our goals. We're going to define and understand your role as it relates to situational awareness and active shooter, and to examine what we already know about active shooters, to discuss how to respond to an active shooter situation, and to discuss what to expect when police and other first responders arrive. Let us not forget the past. Let us not forget Sandy Hook. Let us not forget what happened in the Carolinas. Let us not forget what happened in Texas. A lot of these were in churches and schools where our children are at. Active shooters don't have a barrier. They have no barriers. Soft targets to them are primarily important to get their message across. So let's not forget those that have passed before us. What is situational awareness? Let's define that for a minute. Situational awareness involves being aware of what is happening in the environment in order to understand how information, events, and one's own actions will impact both immediate and future outcomes. Situational awareness is the ability to identify, process, comprehend the crucial elements of information about what is occurring or about to occur. Simply, it's knowing what's going on around you as leaders. It is your responsibility to know what's happening. Let's take a pause there for a minute, and let's talk about what that means. We have a church environment. We know who comes to our churches. We know the people that fellowship with us. That is situational awareness. When you have someone that has not come into your environment before and now they're here, how do you act? How do you respond? How do you make sure that your fellow parishioners are staying safe? And we as leaders have to monitor that on a consistent basis. Okay, now, what is an active shooter? Okay, here's the definition. It says an active shooter is an individual actively engaged in killing or attempting to kill people in a confined, populated area, typically through the use of firearms. It can be other modes as well. They can use knives, they can use explosives, they can use a lot of different things. It's not just firearms anymore. It used to be. What are some of the suspicious things you see on a daily basis? Let's talk about that. What is a suspicious act? You have somebody coming in church in the middle of July with large clothing on, with jackets on. That's suspicious. You have an individual that has never been here before, but doesn't dress the same or act the same as the other parishioners. They don't know how church function occurs. When you stand up, they still sit down. When you pray, they stand up. These are the things you have to be aware of. How do you respond and why? Now, watch this. When we say respond, there's several different factors that come into place. One response is you hide. The other response is fight. Another response is flight. When do we act and oppose those instances in a situation? How do we apply that? Okay, that's what we're going to talk about. What is your role? Here's the thing. Like I said, nowadays it is a big situation going on out here in our country. We have a lot of radical behavior occurring. So be vigilant. Be present and observe. And that doesn't just mean the officiators at church. It also means the parishioners as well. It doesn't mean you take your eye off the ball. Intervene early. Use resources. What are those resources? Okay, this is where we're going to go to hide, fight, or flight. Okay? Those resources is a large number on a smaller number. Okay? This is how you can overcome someone. Okay? If you have the courage to do so. If not, help others flee if you have an exit. If you don't have an exit, hide. If they come upon you, fight. That is primarily important. Fight, for your life. Notify and communicate. If you see someone stand up and you're in the back of the church and they're not able to see, and they stand up with a firearm, you yell gun. You yell knife. Yell as loud as you can to get the attentions of others. Document. Once the incident has surpassed, you document what you witnessed. Why? 1, for future understanding. 2, for law enforcement community. Take control of a stressed situation. What do we mean by that? When you're evacuating personnel, keep them calm, keep them moving quickly. Follow up. You're going to always follow up with your leaders. Why are you going to follow up with your leaders? Because you want to look at what they call breach points. What caused an individual to breach your environment? What was it that was not secured? Now, we're not asking you to be security officers, but this is your home. And you got to understand, you have to protect your home. Who is in charge when you're not around? Who is in charge? Who are your leaders that take control of making sure that your home is secured? Who's in charge? You've got to have a meeting. Your board of directors, your usher board, all of your boards have to come together and say who is in charge. You have to pay attention and know who's going to control that house when you're not there. Now, what do we know about school shooters? We're not going to talk too much about school shooters, but they're very closely defined with church shooters. Why? There is not a profile of a school shooter. Instead, the student who carried out the attacks that differ from one or another in numerous ways. School shootings are rarely impulsive acts. Church shootings are rarely impulsive acts. A shooter will set a target, and that's where they'll go. Dylan Roof chose that church. He literally mapped it out and chose that church. Okay, they are typically thought out and planned in advance. Prior to most school shootings, other students knew the school shooting was going to occur. We don't know that in church. We're not aware of that, unless it's somebody within our church that is committing that act. What we know, the justification excuses offered indicated that the attacks stem not from an absence of values, but from well-developed value systems in which violence was acceptable. Let's talk about that. White supremacy, would we say that was an acceptable act of violence for that organization? In many cases, other students were involved in the attack in some capacity. Never happens in church. It is always the lone gunman. It is always the lone person carrying the explosives. They alone act on those impulses. Threat assessment, 11 key questions. What are the students' motives? In church, they have no motive but to get as many bodies as they possibly can. There is no motive. There is no agenda but to make a statement of death. That's all it is. Dynamics to look at. Family, social dynamics, students, parents, personality, school, disciplinary history, academics, performance, prior intervention and incidents. We don't have that in church. 9 times out of 10, they do not even know the shooter. He's never associated with you ever before. So you'll never have to identify. Now, if it's a school situation, if this church has a school and you have students, it could be, can it? Those things could happen. How about when you have organizations for like camping, summer programs? Can't these things occur during that time as well? Could it be a student who lived in a neighborhood who probably had a problem with another student in that neighborhood? Could it be that? Could it be with an adult? Could it be with their own parents? We have to be aware, and it's called situational awareness. You've got to be aware of who is in your house, even your own parishioners. You've got to know their situations. As leaders, are we examining what our students are believing in, how they're acting, what they're playing with, what they're enjoying themselves with outside of the church? Okay? How should you respond? Always be aware of your environment and any possible danger. You have to be ever watchful. I know it goes back to biblical sense, both day and night. Pay attention to what's around you. When church is going on, it's an enjoyable environment. You're filled, you're getting taught, but you have to pay attention to what's around you. This goes back, way back in history, and I'm talking 2,500 years ago. Why do you think the captain of the host in most churches back then stood at the door with a sword or a spear? Pay attention to what's going on around you. Take note of the nearest exit in any facility inside. Here's the thing you have to pay attention to. This church has 1, 2, 3 exits. Which one, if God forbid, if something occurred, are you going to take and run out of or carry some people out of? Who are you going to take with you? You have the elderly that sit in the front, the mothers that sit in the front. What do you do for them? How do you cover and protect them? These are the things we're going to talk about. What should you do? If a situation occurs in church, in the front, who's going to call 911? And they're up at top. That's your communication center. That's your visual center. They're going to be your first line of visual offense. Lock down, stay put, and it will be announced. In church, it's kind of hard when you have an active shooter in this parish here. Why? Because it's a closed environment. What can happen is he can be in the back and he can take out the whole church. It only takes 5 seconds. 5 seconds. And close to 10 to 15 people can be gone from here. Okay? What should you do is close and secure all doors and windows. Pull down closed blinds and cut off lights. Why do you do that? Okay, so we have a special function going on in church. We're here now. If you have an active shooter in the other building, we can't get out of this building. What do you do here? You turn the lights out. You hide. Call 911. Wait for law enforcement to arrive. Lock all doors. Block all doors. And be prepared to fight if they can breach those doors. You have to be prepared to fight. Okay, it's called sheltering in place. Now, when we look at evacuations and police that come in and when you're evacuating, what happens is if you're evacuating, law enforcement is coming, you ought to run out with your hands where? In the air. Why? It's a submissive behavior and shows that you are not a viable threat. You are to verbalize to law enforcement what the threat is. Somebody is shooting inside. Now, here's how quick a shooter shows up in your church. This is how quick it happens. Are you ready? Okay. Pan over. That's how fast it happens. This is the posture you have to take note of. He is not at the far back of the church. He is not at the far front of the church. He is in a median area where he can take out as many targets as he can. Thank you very much. And it happens within 5 seconds. So what do leaders need to do? Unfortunately, I have to say this. Some leaders need to be armed. I'm going to say it exactly as it is. Some leaders need to be armed. Let's pan back over to him and get that same action again. Let's get the gentleman in the blue in the back and act as if you're armed. Let's have him move over towards that gentleman. If you had a leader in the back of the church that is armed, look how fast he can take him out before he can even probably shoot someone. This occurred in Texas with the former FBI agent. Thank you. Okay, but then you have a situation where it could be a hostage situation. Let's pan over. Okay, look how fast that happens. And that is because we didn't place that person, from the ushers didn't place that person in a position where they are not a threat to someone else. This is a stranger that came into your church to take someone hostage. Look how fearful that situation could occur. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to do some practical exercises, and we're going to show you some. I want the gentleman with the blue shirt to come on up front. The gentleman with the firearm come up front. Okay, let's have our hostage taker come on up front as well. This is just one level of disarming or a fight situation. Okay, I need you to pull the firearm out, okay? Most situations that occur, they're going to aim that firearm at who? The parishioner. Let me grab that from you. I don't want you pointing that at anybody. Okay, just use your hand. Okay? Look at where he's at. Look at his posture. He's not going to just aim at someone. He's just going to start shooting. Okay? So what we're going to have do, we got our martial arts expert over here. What we're going to have do is he's next to him. Okay? Okay, go ahead and put your arm out. What he's going to do is take his entire body and put it where? Okay? What is she going to do? Okay? She is not going to try to take his gun because she probably can't. All right? No, you're not going to shoot him because you don't have a gun. All right? Come on over here. Okay, keep him down. Okay? Come on over here. Okay? She's going to do the exact same thing that he's going to do. Okay? This is a fight situation. Now they're fighting for their lives. Okay? Now they're in a situation where their lives are in danger. But this is an active shooter that probably would have shot them anyway. Am I correct? Okay? So this is where the fight or flight situation occurs. You are going to fight until you can get that weapon away from him. Okay? And whatever it takes from this position, you utilize. But it's a survival behavior. It is not a technique. To disarm someone is not a technique when you don't know what you're doing. Okay? All right, thank you very much. If you have a hostage situation, come on up here, stay here. Guys, stay here for a minute. In a lot of situations, in hostage situations, they got a knife, they have a gun. Let's do it with the example of a gun, okay? And what are they trying to do? Either rob the church or make a statement and create hostages. What does everybody else do when that situation occurs? Leave. Don't stick around. Leave. Do not make yourself a target. But if there's people next to her, put your arm around like you did before. Okay, what does all the other big men do? They jump on her. It's a fight or flight situation. You cannot determine the factors in the outcome in a hostage situation when that occurs. So you got to be careful. It's your decision, but it's a fight, and you're fighting for survival. Thank you very much. Okay, we've gone to this position. Let me take some questions from the audience.
All right, folks, as we had mentioned, you can go ahead and type in the chat either on YouTube or on Zoom if you are there. So do we have any questions at this particular point in time? No, it doesn't look like we have any at this particular point.
They don't love me?
I have a question.
Go for it.
In the times like this where you have points of vulnerability within the church, should you be trying to stop anyone from, or scanning everyone that's coming in? Or is it when you're trying to find out who the bad person is? Because, you know, when we have visitors, we are supposed to let anyone come in as they are, you know. So we don't want to see people and think they're automatically a threat because they're not wearing what we think they should be wearing to church. How do you go around that with a level of, what's the word I'm looking for, political correctness?
Awareness.
Awareness. And awareness and sensitivity to where you're not trying to push someone out of the church that's trying to rehabilitate their life.
Here's the thing. When people are getting ready to commit a crime, there are some telltale signs you can look at. One, they're walking with their head down. Okay, two, they're acting erratic. Erratic behavior means they're nervous. Okay? Number three, it's not about trying to tell this person, I can identify you as a threat, because most of the time you can't, okay? But you have to be aware of their behavior. If you bring them in the church and they choose they want to sit somewhere else versus where you're trying to sit them, okay? Because some people will choose their targets, okay? These are some behaviors you want to be aware of. I'm not going to tell you not to allow that person to come in the church, because you can't do that. Okay, because people are coming in to receive a word, okay, and you don't want to take that away from them. But here's what you do want to watch for. That's the one you watch. You get what I'm saying? Keep your eye on that person, all right? Just don't take your eyes off them, and don't put yourself in a situation where you have to confront someone saying, I have a fear of you being here. We don't want that. But what you want to do is you just want to be aware of how their behavior is, how they're acting, if they're fidgety, if they're reaching in their pockets consistently, if they're grabbing to their side. A person that has a firearm on them, they're going to always check and make sure they still have their firearm on them. So just watch for those things. Anything else?
All right, we have one question in the chat. What if you are the hostage and they catch you off guard? How do you defend yourself?
Fight. Fight. Now, a lot of people will say in hostage situations, be submissive to the hostage taker. Do you know what this person is capable of doing or what they're trying to do? Fight. And I'm not going to say it any less. You fight with all you have. You scream as loud as you can. You fight. Other people will come to your aid, okay? Others, other than that, leave. But you fight. Because this is a fight or flight. It's a survival situation you're in. Look, here's the thing, okay? If someone comes into your church and they're holding you hostage, they're coming to take a body. That's what they're coming for, okay? They're not coming to leave here after all these witnesses are in here. They're not coming to leave here alive. Do you understand what I'm saying? You fight.
All right, next question. So if there is a hostage situation, is there a designated person to call law enforcement, or does everybody just pick up their phone as soon as they're in the safe space?
Everybody pick up their phones. You send out as much of an alarm as you possibly can. Everyone calls 911. I don't care if you jam 911 up, they're coming. And they know how severe the situation is by the number of phone calls that you're making to them.
What do you do in the situation if there are two gunmen in the space?
If there's two gunmen, now here's the thing. Most of it's not going to be two gunmen, but if there is two gunmen, okay, your staff should be ready to either neutralize that individual or to evacuate accordingly. Look, here's the thing. Let's say you got a gunman on the left and you got a gunman on the right. They're both in the middle of the church. What door can the back of the church go out of? The back door, right? Okay, they're going to start shooting. Okay, that's a fact. They're going to start shooting. Where should your armed ushers be? Okay, now we talk about this a lot. Your ushers should be armed. They're not security officers. But your first line of defense is going to be fight. That's your first line of defense. So you're going to have armed officers, armed trustees here. You're going to have ushers there that are armed. You're going to have some of your parishioners that are armed. Okay, if you have two gunmen, fight. Fight. I'm not going to say, I can't say it any clearer. This is a situation where lives are going to be in jeopardy. If you got two gunmen, there's no pause. They're going to start shooting. Next question.
All right. Do you know if there are any laws against those who are legal gun owners or legal gun owners bringing their guns or any sort of firearms to church with them?
Okay, I teach a concealed carry class, and one of the understandings in concealed carry, if your church allows you to carry your firearm in church, you're not in an illegal situation. Okay, if your church allows you to have a firearm on you, you're not in an illegal situation. It's just the same as if I carry my firearm going into Walmart. But if there's a sign on Walmart's door that says no firearms allowed beyond this point, then I can't bring it in there. Now I'm illegal. But if the church allows their parishioners, their trustees, or whoever comes to church to be armed, they're not security officers, they are operating within the limits of the law. They're operating under the law.
All right. The next one, somebody was asking, how dangerous is it for a leader to be armed?
You got to clarify. How dangerous is it for a leader to be armed?
Yes, that was the question.
Okay.
That they had there.
Let's understand this. If you're a leader and you're armed, that means you went to a proficient training, a firearm safety course. You went through a training. You learned how to shoot, how to engage with your firearm, a civil threat. And in that instant, it's not a danger. Look, here's the thing. Many people in many churches carry firearms, so it's not a danger. As long as you secure it and keep it concealed, okay, that's where you're operating within the limits of the law and you're being safe.
Next question. Do you think that churches should have guards on duty?
I can say that, but here's the thing. The insurance and the cost to have security officers, they have to go through security training and different levels of training to be a security officer. They have to get certified by the state as well. It's called a D and a G license. All of that carries also the responsibility of insurance. Okay, so if the church can afford to do that, that's fine. If they can afford to do that. But if the church does not have the funding to do it, look, as long as your parishioners are armed, I don't think people want to come in and try to do anything in your church, try to commit any crimes.
All right, next question. Do you think that churches should practice drills for these different types of scenarios?
Oh, you better believe it. That is the one thing that I actually campaign on is how many, because I'll be calling this church and I'll be finding out, what are your drills? What have you been doing throughout the year? Okay, and I don't think Dominique is going to let me get away with that. So just understand, yes, you should be doing drills, evacuation drills. It's just like you do fire drills. And you certify your fire drills every year, evacuation drills. I'm going to actually leave this slide for you, but you should be doing that every 4 months. You have a big, huge meeting, these are where you do your drills at. You have gatherings, before your gatherings, you do your drills. If you're going to be moving children, let me explain this first. That is something that's primarily important. Who are your leaders who are armed? Who are your leaders that are watching your perimeters and different things like that? Yes, you need to be doing drills.
Right. Next question is, as a parishioner in the effort of self-defense, if you see something happening here, it's very similar to the shooting in Texas, would you get in trouble for shooting in self-defense if you're shooting on church grounds if there's a situation?
No. I'm going to definitely say no. In many situations where there was a shooting in church, where the parishioner shot the assailant, the parishioner did not get in trouble. Why am I saying that, though? Because it is a felony in progress. And if you are a concealed carry person, you should be acting on that felony. And you should be stopping that. Because in some instances, if you have a concealed carry license and somebody knows you have a firearm and somebody shot somebody else and you were in that vicinity where you could have neutralized that situation, you could be sued for that.
Next question. If you do not have a guard on duty or someone who is armed on the premises and you see somebody who is acting suspicious, should you call 911?
Only if in that suspicion a felony is being committed. This is the problem that we have. And this is how active shooters get on the property. They can be very suspicious, okay? But are they committing a crime? Suspicion doesn't incur a crime. Suspicion incurs an awareness. So we have to understand that suspicion does not mean that person is committing a crime. It actually means you keep your eye on them.
All right. Next question that somebody had. At what point should situational awareness transition into action?
When action is being imposed, when an illegal act is being imposed. You have to understand something. Because we have situational awareness, the law specifically states there are 4 acts that has to occur before you can actually do something. The first one, it should be verbal. If it's not verbal, it should be visual. If it's visual, it should be imminent. And if it's imminent, there's no room to escape. That's the law. Okay, so let's keep an eye on that and pay attention to that. Those are the 4 acts that says you can engage.
Right. Next question. Should we be notified of all who are carrying firearms on the church grounds as far, now were you talking about leaders specifically or just anybody walking in? So let's look at both of those.
Let's look at both of them. I'd rather do that. No. Here's the reason why I say that, okay? If I'm aware of the leaders that have firearms, and let's just say the hostage situation occurs, and they yell out, who's got the guns? There could be somebody else in the audience, am I correct? That'll take them out, okay? No. But if I'm a parishioner, it's nobody's business if I have a firearm, okay? It's good that I have one, but it's nobody's business. That's why they call it conceal carry.
So you're saying that church leaders, let's say like the board of the church or something, they don't necessarily need to know either?
No, they do with each other, yeah, but not anybody else.
Okay, so leaders or like security
Yeah, because the
leaders,
pastor's going to want to know who's armed.
Okay.
Because the pastor's probably going to say, that's the one that's going to sit right there. Okay? All right, so just understand, yes, the leaders should know who has a concealed carry. And that's not to say that you do drills as if you're security. You're not security. I'm going to say that with the strongest of phrase. You are not security, okay? You are just a concealed carry person that works in church as an usher or as a faith leader, okay?
All right, next question. Would you advise churches to post signs of no firearms being allowed on the premises? And if so, would you consider anyone who comes on the premises past that sign knowingly a threat?
Okay. I go back, me and Dominique talked about this about 2 weeks ago. Were there notifications in the synagogues that you weren't allowed to carry your sword if you were an officer with the Israelis? No, you can carry your sword in the church. You were able to take it with you. But who was in charge of that? The captain of the host, am I correct? The Bible teaches us that. So if that's the case, no, don't post signs. Because you want your parishioners to be armed because that's your first line of defense. You want your parishioners to be armed. You don't want them fearful of not being able to protect their house. You see what I'm saying? It's the same as if I said in my house, no firearms past this point, and I walk in my house with a firearm. If somebody breaks in my house and I shoot them, I'll go to jail. Did you know that? It's my own law I set up in my house, and I'll go to jail because of that law. All right? So no, you don't want to do that.
Right. And then maybe another question that kind of ties into what you were just saying. So to what condition does someone who considers themselves or people who consider true Christians, why would they need to carry firearms if they understand that the Lord is their shepherd?
I am so glad you said that. I am so glad. And I'm just giving you a little background. I grew up in church. I'm a man of God, and I give God the glory for giving me this understanding. I prayed for wisdom on why do I teach this class. I pray for wisdom. Why am I giving people the understanding of protection? Here, let me understand this. The Bible says in my name, that's when I give up my life. In Jesus' name. But not when somebody wants to take my life frivolously for no reason at all. You understand what I'm saying? God did not tell me put myself out there on the front line to be taken out just in general. He said in my name. So at the end of the day, yes, in church, You're thinking somebody's coming to do it in the name of Jesus? To have you turn away from him? No. They're doing it for their own self-righteousness. So understand this. It has nothing to do with God's word. It has all to do with protecting God's people. So let's understand that. That's what this is all about. You're protecting his people. You think David would have did this unarmed? He did it one time when God said, when you go out there, no arms at all. Just look to me. That was the only time you can see in the Bible that that happened. So all the other times it says, take up your arms. Protect yourself. Okay? Here's another phrase. Be ever watchful both day and night. Be weary of wolves in sheep's clothing. I can keep going, but we have to understand it's not all about saying I'm violating God's word. I'm not. But I'm protecting his people.
All right, next question. What's the best way or place for somebody to carry their firearm on church grounds, especially when people like to hug different members of the church, including children who may just come up and like...
Yeah, Dominique gave me a hug today. She knew I had my firearm on me. But she's checking on me. She looks after her big brother. But here's the thing. Understand this, okay? When you're carrying a firearm, there's different levels of carry, okay? I carry mine on my right hip. It's been my military background. It's been my law enforcement background. It's been when I'm working with diamond exchanges and different things like that. Look, all I'm telling women not to do is carry it in their pocketbook. Someone can take your pocketbook from you. But I'm telling you to put it in an indiscreet place that you have easy access to it. That doesn't mean you go and buy a big old gun and try to conceal it. That doesn't work, okay? Glock 19s, moderate firearms, not supposed to say names, but, you know, moderate firearms, medium firearms you can put on yourself, and you can put them in such an inconspicuous place that other people don't know. You know I carry a firearm on my right hip because you saw me put it away. But if a man is wearing a suit, okay, it's easy to conceal. If he's wearing a shirt, okay, I'm gonna have the cameraman step out for 1 minute. Okay, here's an area where he can hold it, put it. Here's another area where he can put it, right here. Okay, so you have different areas where you can conceal your firearm. I do teach firearm concealment because it is the core to having a concealed carry license.
Okay, next question. If there is, in any situation, is there ever a time that you should try to talk them down?
No.
And why not?
They don't listen to you. They're not here for you to try to talk them down, okay? It's been very few situations where someone is shooting someone and you can tell them to stop. Being submissive when you have an armed assailant, you will always lose. The armed assailant will always win, okay? We have to understand that. Okay, they have the upper hand. All you have is words. Some people believe their words are more powerful than the action of an individual, but they've already told themselves in their own mind their words are much more powerful than yours.
So basically it should be my life or theirs?
You better believe it. That's the way it is. And unfortunately, it's as harsh as it sounds, but they're saying the exact same thing.
Next one, you were talking about carrying earlier. For anybody who, if their firearm, I'm going to say it exactly as a phrase, if my firearm was seen bulging from my clothes, is that a breach of being concealed?
Okay, let's understand what conceal means. It means having a firearm in such an inconspicuous way that one does not know that you're carrying a firearm. That's a conceal. Okay, so how does that, if I'm bulging, okay, people are going to know I carry a firearm. That means I bought a firearm or I'm carrying a firearm way too big for me. You want one that's easily concealed and inconspicuous. Look, a lot of people will buy a firearm based upon their ego. And I always say ego is edging God out. You want to be inconspicuous. You purchase a firearm that is not going to be as big as your ego.
Next,
I see you smiling. You liked that one, didn't you?
if I perceive somebody looks like a threat, example, they've got a super long coat in the summer here. Is it safe to call attention to that person? And let me add a second part to it. If so, who are we calling? Who are we notifying?
Okay. Earlier in the slide, we talked about communication. Okay. There's two types of communication. There's verbal and there's visual. There's also a physical communication as well, where you use hand signals and different things like that. Leadership, if a person, you place somebody in a seat and you have another leader on the other side, maybe point to your eyes and then point to him. They understand, keep a watch on that individual. Okay, so you use physical and visual, but not verbal. Don't yell out, hey, keep an eye on that guy right there. I'm weary about him. But you're going to use your hands, okay, and you're going to use just the physical posturing and letting them know, keep an eye on that individual.
All right, so we were talking earlier about having people on the usher board carry, if they do. Do you have any recommendations on how many should be carrying, even if not all at the same time, or if you don't?
As many as you can. As many as you can. It doesn't hurt. Okay, now I'm not talking about creating an armed encampment. Okay, understand, we're gonna put a line through that, okay? But as many as want to be armed, that's fine. And here's the thing, put yourself in a place where you can keep an eye, that you can defend your church, but as many as you can. If you feel like you want to be armed, that's fine. I have a question over here.
What was your question? Just a second here. All right, so here's a question in the meantime. So if our local organization's risk management does not cover claims as far as firearm involvement, what do you say to people who may be deterred about wanting to go ahead and have those people on the premises carrying, or making sure that there are people within your security team that are carrying, because risk management won't cover the church with that?
Okay, risk management will not cover any church, by the way, under that. The individuals that have a concealed carry, get your own insurance. It's only $10 to $15 a month. It's a responsibility. Insure yourself, okay? Get your own insurance. It's not expensive. It's really cheap. There's several organizations out there that, if you're saying I'm doing it, to have a concealed carry and I don't earn that much money, it's really not expensive insurance to have. And I tell a lot of parishioners, if you carry a concealed firearm, get insured. Get the insurance. It covers you up to $1 million. Certain places will cover you with attorneys and different things like that as well for the same $10 to $15 a month. Get your own insurance. Don't rely on the church. Remember, you're not a security officer in that church. If you were, risk management will insure you, okay? But if you're not, get your own insurance. It's really cheap, 10 to 15 bucks a month, you're good to go.
Here's our other question.
My question is about when I refer to the Bible about David in first the Goliath. Do you think God can stop the active shooter not to kill his people?
Oh yeah. I am never going to stop believing that God can't stop an active shooter. But then again, I'm not going to be foolish with God's word. I'm not going to test his word. Not on that. I won't do that. I will not put God to the test. Okay? So therefore, I will defend myself, but I'm not putting him to the test. If Christ didn't put God to the test, I won't do it.
Thank you. So, in case the active shooter is stand it point on the people God, and God doesn't want that happen, he stop the active shooter, and then the officer who has a gun in the church, he kill the active shooter. What you think they're going to think about Seventh-day Adventist Church?
Well, let's go back into biblical history. When the Israelites were surrounded by the enemy, and they prayed to God, and before one life died, the enemy was so confused that they killed each other. So there was never a death. If God doesn't want that to happen, if he he will confuse that individual. They killed each other, not the Israelites. You understand what I'm saying? So I, again, will not put God to the test. And the unfortunate thing about it is I just finished my seminary a month ago.
All right, next question. With this new threat environment, let's say a church is building or remodeling, what do you think that the physical design of the churches should be?
You know what? Here's the funny thing about it. The architect and design of the church has nothing to do with the threat assessment. You can build a church that looks like a castle with a moat around it, but you got to remember, castles were overtaken. So the threat itself are people who are crafty enough to get around all the architect. I can say you build this or you build that and this become more secure, but then you got to remember there's other ways they can do it. Look, a criminal will find a way. Some of the best houses that have the highest rated security they've broken into. So understand that I'm not going to use the architect as an excuse to say, well, this is a bad situation because this architect is not up to snuff or up to standard. There were some very good churches that were very secured that people have gone into and committed crimes. So we can't use the architect for that. That's pretty much not going to work. What you are going to be aware of is what they call breach points, the doors. Okay, how do I secure those? Because that's where they're coming through. They're not going to break a window while church service is going on. They're going to come through the door, and they're going to come in nonchalantly. Okay?
All right, next question. Do you think a 9mm is too big for a female to carry?
I carry a 45. What do you think? 9mm is a good firearm to have because the round itself, depending on the type of round you have, will do more than enough. Will do more than enough damage. It also affords the opportunity to have a smaller caliber firearm as well. Some people think a 380. Okay, if you're going to carry a 380, be proficient in it. It doesn't matter the size of the round, but you have to be proficient in shooting. Because here's the thing that is going to occur, and I didn't cover this. Let's say, for instance, the gentleman over to the right had the firearm up in the air and he started shooting at people. Everybody else is sitting down or hitting the ground at this time. You stand up and shoot, the bullet ricochets off a wall, off a beam or something and hits somebody on the ground. Okay, because we weren't proficient in shooting. If you get a concealed carry, you should be going to the range, you should be training yourself and being proficient in your firearm. So the round really doesn't matter.
All right. And then the other question we have is what to do if you are being attacked or somebody is running toward you with a knife, may not have some other people around in order to help, tackle or keep the people away. What do you do? Female, male?
If you don't have a firearm, run. Run. If you're in a corner, pick up something and start swinging. Okay? But fight if you cannot run. Remember what I said. There's 4 rules of engagement when you do have a firearm. Verbal, visual, and imminent. Imminent means that it's happening at that particular time. Okay? And 4th is you have no room to escape. Okay? So fight. If you have no room to escape, fight.
Right. Here's another question. As far as, is shooting somebody in the back justified in an active shooter situation?
If he's shooting somebody to the front, yeah, it's justified.
Apply in the state of Georgia, do you know?
Yeah, here's the thing you got to understand, okay? Engaging in active shooter is the active shooter is in the act of committing murder. If you shot him in the back, surprise, okay? But he was already engaging in that act, okay? Or attempting to engage in that act. So if you shot him in the back, no, you did the right thing.
What do you say to the person who says 911 asked too many questions and they just need to get to the point? But they feel like they can take care of this faster.
Here's the thing about 911. You have to understand 911 is reacting, not being proactive. When you call 911, you have now reacted to a situation that has occurred. Okay, they're going to ask, has that person either been neutralized or is everybody safe or is what is going on? Because they want as much information as law enforcement is on their way As they're on their way, they want as much information as they can gather from you, so when they finally get there, they have a scenario that they can have a full picture of.
Right. Other question that we have here. In the event that, let's say, there's a situation where a young person or a child gets access to a firearm, you know, accidentally shoots it off in a church building, you know, somebody wasn't watching where their stuff is. What do you say in order to have leadership continue to be okay with the fact that firearms are on the premises and being concealed in that type of situation? Because I know in churches in the past, like, one thing happens and then they want to shut it all down.
Well, let's first back up. If a child gets access to a firearm from an individual, that individual needs to go to jail. I say that from a law enforcement perspective because you have to conceal and secure, correct? Okay, so let's go to step 2. If a child gets a hold of a firearm from an individual who did not secure their firearm and they committed an act occurred where an accidental shooting occurred, okay, that's called an isolated criminal incident. Okay, that doesn't cover the entire church. That's not means everybody were like that. Okay, so we can't do a knee-jerk reaction that says no one can have a firearm. But that person should be held accountable and responsible. Look, here's the thing. It should be told and it should be stressed, even by risk management. If you have a firearm, whatever occurs with that firearm and you're on your own. Okay, risk management should let that individual know. Or there should be a flyer that goes out and says, if you're carrying a firearm, any occurrence with that firearm is not under the construct of the church.
All right, next question. So if you have somebody suspicious coming in, as an usher, where would you seat a guest who looks suspicious without calling attention to them?
I'm going to hope the church can follow me with the cameras, okay? If in fact you have an individual that comes into church, okay? Usually ushers will start bringing people in to the sides, correct? Sometimes they'll walk down the middle depending on how the ushers are doing on the sides. Am I correct in saying that? Okay, so here's the thing. If you have a suspicious character, okay, you want to put that person in a position where everyone can see them. They don't want to be in that position. I'm going to explain that. I'm going to let you know that. But what they call a pinch point or a hiding point is usually on the perimeters, just like that. They like that. Why? Because it's easy access to what? Angle shoot someone. But when you put them on the inside, okay, they don't like that. But here's the problem with that. They'll take that because now they've got this area they can shoot at as well, right? So where would you put them? Right in the back of the church. Right in the back. That's where you put them at. Why? Because everybody can see them. Am I right? But if I put them in the front, who am I holding vulnerable? The pastor. I don't want to hold the pastor vulnerable. I don't want to hold, you know, the mothers of the church vulnerable. So I'm going to put them in the back somewhere.
All right. For safety, do you think that churches could put a firearm detector at the entrance of the doors as a prevention?
Doesn't work. I'm going to tell you why it doesn't work. I have a 30S Glock. Okay, my Glock can get through some metal detectors. So you got to be careful because then you got people with, you know, with bad knees that might have a knee replacement, hip replacement, or whatever. It's going to detect, it's going to pick that up. A person can easily say, you know, yeah, I got a bad knee, but under the law, you can't search them. You're not security.
All right, next question. What can I do if I'm inside my car and somebody's trying to shoot me in the church parking lot and I pull a firearm out on them? Would I get in trouble?
No. Shoot them. I'll just say it plain as that. Shoot them. Because if somebody's trying to shoot you in the church parking lot, that is a felonious assault, okay? That is happening to you. It's imminent. Can you get away? Did you get your car started? I don't know. If you didn't get your car started, are you behind other cars? Where are you placed at? okay? And if this person is shooting you or trying to shoot you, okay, and you have your firearm sitting to your side or something like that, yeah, you better fire back. Protect yourself.
All right. Somebody just wanted a little bit more clarification when you were talking about shooting the assailant or whoever the shooter is in the back. Clarifying on when that's appropriate, when not.
All right, let's have those two gentlemen come back up here. I'm going to give you a practical exercise. I think it works a lot easier if you can see what I'm talking about. I'm going to have the mothers over here at the church. So, gentlemen, come on over here. I know coming down here is a little rough. I'm going to have you stand behind them, and you're going to be the shooter. I'm going to have you come over here. Okay? You're going to be in the aisle. Just be on the outside of the aisle. And stand on the outside of the aisle. You're going to stand over here. He's a proficient shooter, by the way. I happen to know that. Okay, so act like you're pointing a gun to him. Okay, no, I want you to turn your back to him, though. Okay? And he shoots him in the back. Is that a protective action that is occurring? Is he trying to protect those women? Okay? Because what is happening? It is imminent. Okay? And they can't escape. Okay? But he has the firearm. So if he shoots them in the back, he's protecting those women and everybody else in the church as well. Okay? Thank you, gentlemen.
Let's see here. Next question. Is there any particular firearm that you would recommend for women who want to be able to conceal under dresses, skirts?
I'm going to refer that to Dominique. I've already talked to her about it. I want you guys to talk to Dominique. She already knows what type of firearm. I've instructed her, and she knows a lot about what type of firearms women should be carrying. You could talk to her mom, too.
All right. Next question. What do you say to somebody who, while going in for a hug, accidentally touches your gun in a way that doesn't scare them, especially when you have people who tend to be a little bit more fearful of firearms?
If they show any fear, just say it's for my protection. That's all. You know, that happens. That's going to happen. You're going to hug somebody, and you're going to feel their firearm. There's several of us in this church that carry firearms. We've had people hug us, and that was a fearful situation for them, saying, no, it's just for my protection. I'm licensed.
Here's another question. So when we travel with our young people, we typically have a form that we have to fill out stating who's going on the trip, who are the drivers, who are the adults, whose vehicles are we using. Do you think that even though risk management doesn't cover, you know, any firearm-related incidents, that we should note that? Because it should only be going to the clerk, you know, and the security officer, maybe like 2 people should be getting copies of these forms as we're going off-site. So do you think that should be listed on the forms as well, who is carrying in the group?
Well, under the law, it says you don't have to unless it's specified as a rule, okay? So that's kind of shaky waters, but here's the thing. If risk management has a fear of someone carrying a firearm or has want to be warned, okay, let's say that, or want to be aware, then they should ask, do you have a concealed carry license, and will you be carrying your firearm with you? They can make that noted. It's not to determine that they're and if the answer is yes, then the second phrase should be that risk management does not cover you for your firearm. You should have your own insurance, and it's for your own protection, okay? So they should make that aware, make people be aware of that. You're not working for the church because you have a firearm. You're working for the church, but your firearm is not included in your work.
Okay. Other question, going back to the situation of the child getting access to a firearm. So no incident happens, but somebody notices that, stops the child. What sort of, I don't want to say the word disciplinary, but what sort of measures can those at the local church take to make sure, number one, that this individual is dealt with for, you know, just not being negligent with what they have? but also in a way that, you know, doesn't necessarily push them away and have them hate us moving forward.
Individuals that have their own concealed carry know it's their responsibility to conceal that firearm. And the law is specific to that, okay? So if a child gets a hold of someone's firearm, look, at the end of the day, if I work to keep the safety of those children, I'm going to have to turn that person in. I'm going to have to let the law know that this individual did not secure their firearm and this child got a hold of it. Why do I stay that severe and that drastic? Because death is that severe and that drastic. I have to do the right thing under the law, okay, and let that be known. And if you can, and risk management should say too, if a child gets a hold of a firearm, of your firearm, then you're held liable under the law as a felony, okay? So we all should be aware of that, because when we get our concealed carry, we're aware of that. The first rule that they teach in safety of your concealed carry is the security of your firearm. If you are negligent and you're not being secured, that means you had no love and you didn't care for that child that got a hold of it. Okay, so as adults, we have to be responsible.
Right. Somebody just wanted to get some clarification about what you were saying about insurance for concealed owners. What type of insurance does a person with a concealed license need to have? And is it different per state? Like our group covers Florida and southern Georgia. So is there a different one in Georgia than one in Florida that you need to get?
Certain conglomerates will cover many different states and different levels of insurance. Here's the thing. There's a company out there called USCCA. Then you've got also the NRA. There's a lot of them that cover multiple states as far as insurance is concerned. So that you don't have to be worried about. They will cover that state according to those guidelines. Here's the good part about it though, okay? It is inexpensive, but they cover you to the hilt. They do cover you to the hilt. So it's huge.
If somebody has insurance just dealing with one state and they're traveling from one state to another for a trip, again by themselves or with a group of people, do they need to get different insurance for the states that they are crossing through or going to, if it's a multi-state trip, or can they just keep the same one that they have?
I suggest calling the insurance company and see if that will carry in that state. That's what I would suggest, because if not, they will link you to an insurance company for that state as a temporary usage.
Next question, what are your thoughts on a mental health checkup being a component of a concealed carry privilege?
Oh yeah, I'm good on that. I believe in that wholeheartedly, because there are some people that do get a firearm concealed carry and they're not mentally capable of actually keeping it, you know? Yeah, I do believe in that. Do I think it should be universal to the extreme where it goes way in depth? No, because the reason why is because your FBI background check will look for mental instabilities. But to take a mental test, you're impeding on the infringement of your Second Amendment rights, okay? And one of them is mental handicap, believe it or not. The unfortunate thing about it is what level and what categories do you say to a person, well, you're mentally incapable of carrying a firearm. What level can I say that? Okay, I can say if a person's been Baker Acted in the last 7 years, that person should not have a firearm. I can say the individual that committed domestic violence should not have a firearm. Child abuse should not have a firearm, okay? And guess what? The law already says that. They will do a background check to make sure that those occurrences have not occurred for you, and that'll clear you to get a firearm. But mental background checks, I do believe in them, but they're already being done.
All right, next one. How do you feel about concealed firearms with lasers?
I don't like them.
And because?
And the reason why, I knew you was going to ask that. The reason why I don't is because let's say you have it concealed and you have your firearm sitting in your jacket. And let's say you have one where you have a hanging firearm. If you hit that button and that laser shows up, you're going to put a whole lot of people in fear. okay? So I have a problem with lasers, okay? Do I recommend you don't have them? No, I just won't have one. But other people, that's their preference. They feel like they can aim better with the laser, but that's their preference.
Right. Other question. What would you do in the situation if the person coming in has a grenade?
Person coming in has a grenade, you run. You run. Here's the reason why I'm saying that, okay? I can throw a grenade just the same way a bullet can come at me as well. You run, okay? You get away from the vicinity of that grenade. It's usually anywhere from 5 to 8 feet. That grenade is volatilely effective, and it can take you out, okay? You run. Or if that person, because here's the reason why I say that, okay? If you have someone that shoots the person with the grenade and they've already released it, okay, you're committing, it might be construed as a felony, okay? It can be construed as a felony. Do I shoot the person when they pull the grenade out? Yes. But once they throw it, I'm in that gray area.
All right, next question. Wouldn't it be better for church leaders to carry tasers instead of firearms?
Carry what? I'm glad you said that. Taser operates the same as a firearm. But let me explain something to you. If I'm hyped up on drugs, if I'm in a different state of mind, I've been tased before and I have not dropped. I've had 50,000 volts go through my body and I've not fall. Okay? There are some people that are really jacked up, and you tase them, they will still shoot you. As a matter of fact, their reactionary method will put a bullet in you. So do I say taser? That's your choice, and if that's your weapon, that's okay. But I just personally won't have one. And I won't tell somebody, well, this is going to help keep us okay.
All right. Let's see here. So back to the detection. So we had spoken earlier about detection, whether or not you believe in like actual metal detectors or doing like a search or a pat down or anything like that. Coming in, I think, what was this question? Coming in, do you think that people should make it a point to try to see? Because there are some people who don't conceal as well as others. Do you think that those who we can see aren't concealing as well, should they be seated in that same general back area if we don't recognize them as members of our church?
Okay. You will have people from time to time visit your church that have a firearm on them. You will have that. I'm not going to say you won't. Is that person a threat to your church? We can't determine that. If you see that that person does have a firearm on them, can you tell them not to have that fire on them? No, you can't. Because if your parishioners have it, you can't stop them from having it. But can you put them in a place where you can keep an eye on them? Yes, you can. Okay? Because the ushers tell you where to sit. Okay? That's the control you have. Understand that. Your ushers have the highest rate of control in your church. They're seating your people. They control who sits where. So if the ushers know that that person has a firearm, yeah, where would you sit them at? Right in the back of the church, where I can see them. Because I'm not going to put a guy with a gun who's never been in my church and I'm going to sit him up here or over here. I'm just not going to do that.
What do you think is the best non-lethal weapon, other than one's mind, is the exact way the question was phrased? What do you think is the best non-lethal weapon for people to be able to use?
In any given situation, a non-lethal weapon? Okay. Let's identify what non-lethal means. That the weapon engages an individual in such a way that it will not cause life and limb to be excluded. Okay? It's non-lethal. Okay? That means that that person will not die. Okay? But here's the problem with a non-lethal weapon. I can get a baton, and I can have an extendable baton and engage that baton. And as soon as that thing racks open and I get ready to hit someone with it who has a gun, he's going to shoot me. Okay? If I get ready to hit someone who has a knife, I have to be first proficient in that non-lethal weapon. Non-lethal weapons do require you to have just as much training and even more as if you had a firearm. Okay? And you have to be proficient in that, because anything that steps outside of that is not going to hurt them in the first place, and they're going to hurt you. So you want to be proficient if you do get a non-lethal weapon. Do I say a baton? Yes. Do I say tasers? Yes. Do I say mace? Yes. But you got to remember, these are temporary distortions before the crime. So let's say, for instance, I spray mace in someone's face. The level of mace, with the Caspian level of mace that we have out here, it's not high enough to incapacitate you for a very long period of time. Maybe 5 to 10 seconds, you'll snot and sneeze and all of that, but then you're back in the fight. Okay, it's not the same as law enforcement has. So non-lethal, yes, you can do that. It's fine. I'm not going to say that's wrong, but I am going to say, will it save lives? That has to be a question there. And you have to ask yourself this question. If he has a gun and I spray him with mace, who's he shooting first? And was I effective in engaging mace to incapacitate him so that a church of 120 parishioners can get out of here within 5 to 10 seconds?
If you have a concealed carry permit, can law enforcement know by checking your plate before you're stopped?
Negative. I know there's a lot of situations where people thought that. That's not true. Your license don't tie to your license plate doesn't tie to your concealed carry. Do you want it to? Yes, you can. You can ask DMV to list that on your license plate when they pull it up.
All right. Let's see here. So another one. With the increased knowledge of what to do in active shooter situations, what do you think is the best way to approach church leadership if they have a tendency to be a little bit reluctant in incorporating some safety measures because they feel that firearms are not what the Lord would require us to use to protect the people?
You know, that is amazing that you said that, because that is what people are faced with today. But here's the thing. Let reality sink in. Let the actions of what's been going on today sink in. Because these are fellow pastors who their parishioners are dealing with. This is the pain that they're dealing with. So we have to pretty much say to ourselves and stress to those leaders, look, I have a fear, and this is the fear. The same way as I live in a great neighborhood, but I have a fear of someone breaking into my home, okay? So if I have that fear, I'm going to protect my home. We have to help those leaders understand that this is what's happening today. It didn't happen when we were young. Look, when we were kids going to church, we didn't have to worry about somebody kicking in the door or coming in and started shooting up the church. Okay, we didn't have those problems, but we have those problems today. They're happening today. You know, it was funny because there was one woman in the Senate. Her name is Green, and she was saying that Sandy Hook never happened. She was saying that Dylan Roof never shot up a church. Okay, these are conspiracies that are trying to convince you that these things don't happen so they can happen to you. Understand, the devil is a liar, and he's putting us in a situation where we're vulnerable. Why? Because he's saying that, okay, well, you know God's word. The devil is going to use it against you and convince you that God said, don't arm yourselves. Come on.
And we're going to finish up with a few more questions here. So if a police officer stops me for any reason and I know I'm concealed, do I let them know about the concealed situation?
Yes, indeed you do. That's why I'm shaking my head. Indeed you do. You put your hands on your steering wheel, 10 to 9, turn your vehicle off, take your keys, put them on top of your dashboard, and you tell them, I'm armed. Make sure you let them know the location of your firearm, and do not take your hands off the dashboard. Your door's unlocked, you let him get in your vehicle or get the firearm out of your vehicle, unload it. This is to keep him and you safe.
And is that something you say prior to them saying, sir or madam, do you know why I stopped you?
Yes.
Okay.
Officer, I'm armed. You can take my firearm before we engage. Okay? Make sure you do that. Okay? It just keeps you and him safe.
All right, next question. Revolvers versus semi-automatics. Which is the safest to conceal carry?
Repeat that again?
Revolvers versus semi-auto. Which is the safest to conceal carry?
Semi-auto. Revolvers have a space between the barrel and the chamber. And if your hand is in front of that, when that revolver is fired, it will shear the skin off to the bone. Okay, so I'm going to say automatic. I have a revolver, but it's in the house.
Do you think that not just security teams, but ushers should be trained about active shooter situations and suspicious characters to help prevent these situations? Because I don't think a lot of churches are involving that training for ushers per se.
Of
so
course.
Do you think that needs to be a base?
Of course. The reason why is the ushers is the first line of notification, okay, guys? Listen, understand this. Brothers and sisters in Christ, the ushers is your first line of defense, okay? They have been since the beginning of time, okay? That's why they call them ushers, okay? So, yes, they should be proficiently trained in active shooting. Okay, they should understand and know what these identifiers are. They're vitally important to the protection of your church. They should know where to place them for the protection of your church. This is important. So ushers, yes, should have that training. And it should be free of charge to them too, by the way.
All right, and let's see here. So we were talking about having your plate be able to go ahead and state that you have a concealed weapon if you want it to. Somebody said, do you think that is a good idea to have that attached to your tag with everything that's going on with the U.S. right now, with the Black Lives Matter position or different mentalities about some prejudices?
That's kind of more of yourself as an individual. Okay, if we look at what's going on with Black Lives Matter, we look at a lot of what law enforcement is doing to African American communities, what they're doing to our black communities, our immigrant communities, and what they're doing to new citizens that have firearm licenses. Here's the problem, okay? There is some levels of injustice that is occurring. I wouldn't have it put on my license plate because I don't want someone who's a wildcat police officer, and I will never say that all officers, by the way, I'm going to do this disclaimer here. 99% of the law enforcement community is incredible. I'm going to say that. This 1% I worry about. So no, I won't do that.
Okay, and then the next question. If you have a church where you may not have anybody who carries, or the church has a stance against that, let's say it's an independent church and they put a sign out there. If somebody comes in, let's say they don't see the sign, but they walk in through another exit and say, okay, you know, they come in and somebody just happens to see that. Again, they're not concealing as well as maybe they have thought. Are we allowed to go ahead and call the police right away? Or should, you know, somebody who maybe is a little bit more versed in that be like, sir, you're printing. Could you?
Diplomacy works. I'm going to say that. If you find someone that is not concealing their firearm and you have a sign at your church that says no firearms are allowed and they walk in and you know they have a firearm, diplomacy works. You can ask them to please take your firearm and put it in your vehicle, and then you're more than welcome to come back into church. You can do that, okay? That is something that's a must do.
And the last one we're going to go ahead and get for today, unless there's another one prior to. So we were talking earlier about persons coming into church, automatic, semi-automatic, whatever it is. Do you think that somebody trained should engage the person if they see that there are a little unstable, and I mean unstable with like maybe the movement of their bodies, maybe they're high or drunk or something like that? Should we still try to engage in some way, or is it just get out, run, get as far away as possible?
If they're not a threat, look, here's the thing, and I grew up in New York, and I went to Mount Carmel Baptist Church in Yonkers, New York. We had 4 individuals come into our church that were high on crack. This was the crack epidemic that was occurring. They were coming seeking salvation and to be free from that. That's an erratic behavior when they come in. They're having an erratic action. They're sitting and they're fidgety and they're doing different things. But what was really nice was the ushers went back there, they comforted them and showed them a lot of love. They got through that event, and today one of them is a very strong pastor in Yonkers, New York, that actually took over Reverend Upshaw's church. So when we have people that are coming in with erratic behavior, we do have to understand the devil is a liar. He's going to put people in positions where the first place of salvation they're going to run to is where? Church. And they're going to have a physical, radical behavior. Is that the person that has a firearm that's an active shooter in my church? I don't know. But I'm going to put them in a position where they're going to be comforted, they're going to be taken care of, and they're going to be well helped through that situation until what? The threat presents itself. And then we act, okay? But no, I will not engage a person negatively because they're coming in church with erratical behavior. I want that person to come to church. That's the person why we're here. That's the person that needs to come into church. Amen? All right?
And we'll actually end with two more. Number one, do you think that churches should be willing to provide ushers with firearm trainings and the access to be able to, or make the investment in having people gain the training, get their concealed carry, as well as purchase firearms for them?
Not at all. Here's the thing. A concealed carry is an individual event and an individual dedication to oneself. That's what they want to do. Okay? Can the church advise, hey, everybody get your firearms so you can protect yourself? That's okay to say that. Okay, we're Americans. We're going to say that. But I will not tell my ushers to do that because now I'm bringing them in as security. And that's not what I want. Okay, but if they feel they want to get their own concealed carry, I can recommend somebody and say, hey, that's a great thing, man, because, you know, Joe here has his concealed carry, Bob over there has his, great, you know, go ahead and get it. But I'm not going to pay for it because under risk management, let's go ahead and let's cover that first. Under risk management, if I paid for his concealed carry, what did I just make him? A security officer. He has to go to school for that. It's called S2. And get his D&G license. Risk management will look at you and say, oh, that's a big no-no. You can't pay for that. There are certain things you can't pay for as a church because then what you're doing is you're fostering the employ of that person in that specific position. Okay, so you got to be very careful with that. If they don't have a securities license, a D&G license, and risk management is not paying security insurance and all of that, leave that alone. Getting a concealed carry is by your own desire. And you can tell your pastors and your leaders, listen, I carry a firearm. Is it okay if I can bring it to church? And they'll say, yeah, go ahead, no problem. But that's not giving them employ. You understand what I'm getting at? There's a separation between the two, okay?
Go ahead. Pastor, go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay, let's say for a sec. Yes. As a pastor, you allow somebody, the person confided in you, and then you said, yes, you can come with it. A situation comes, and then the person has to use the firearm. Now, will that be at any risk for the church later on?
Not at all, Pastor. Here's the reason why, okay? When you have a concealed carry, okay, there's 2 factors with concealed carry. And I think I stressed this earlier. And I'm glad you're here, Pastor, because I wish you were here when I said it earlier. There's 2 factors with having a concealed carry. One is to protect oneself, self-defense. If, in fact, someone knows you have a concealed carry and you've got a gunman, and the guy who has the concealed carry is right there and can take this man out before anything happens, and he doesn't, he can be sued by all of these people. You understand what I'm getting at? Because there was a felony in progress, and he had the means to what? Neutralize it. You give permission for people to have a firearm, okay? Which means that they have a firearm to protect themselves in their house. In their house. So that's an important one. Thank you, Pastor, for that question, too.
All right, and our closing question for the day. Are you available to do these trainings at local churches? And if so, can we get some information on how we can reach out to you in order to be able to get those trainings in a maybe different setting? Because this is one group of leaders, but if we want to get them for other leaders at our local churches, how can we get in contact with you?
Dominique took the reins on that. She started all of that. So, yes, you can contact Dominique. And she'll let me know, and she'll ask me what availability I have and different things like that. She may even show up for those events too. I'm very happy to give that opportunity, so that's not going to be a problem.
Do you have a website for us to be able to access as well?
Yes, it's pioneerccw.com. I'll say that again, pioneerccw.com. Now, my website has a very long name, right, Dominique? Okay, but I'm giving you the short version one.
All right, and I think that is the last of our questions for this afternoon. But Mr. Lenny, thank you again so much for your willingness to come in and do our training. I know this is a little different than what we typically have done or we're prepared for, but we again thank you so much for the information that we have. And I know a lot of us, the chat has been going really crazy about just how we can go ahead and implement these at our local churches as well in order to make sure that we and the parishioners in our church are safe as well.
Well, thank you very much, and I appreciate it. And Pastor, thank you for having me. I love you, I honor you, and I'm just grateful to you. And I love you guys too. Thank you. And thank you, Dominique.
All right, and for those who are on the Zoom for the training, we are going to take a 5-minute break. So it is 5:02 right now. At 5:07, we'll be back on Zoom. And we will go ahead into our next seminar with Pastor Prince Lewis. Thank you.